love that.
Yeah.
That's good.
So let me make sure I've got everything here.
Oh, I see the icon there. We are live on YouTube.
Yeah. Yep. So they'll be in there hanging out with us.
Yeah, I was worried about the connection because I'm at a hotel, and it's one of those these Westin hotels, and I'm using my phone, but so I mean I have my phone here, but I'm using an iPad connected to the phone, and you never know.
Yeah, it's
I
been
think
great.
We're fine, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
And
okay,
we've done
cool.
lots of these with on the iPad, so it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, and then we can actually start the interview part. Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. Everybody, welcome to the Social Hour. My guest today is an amazing cinematographer. I can't wait to get into the meat of this conversation. Let me introduce you to Pedro Luque. He is a Uruguayan-born, award-winning cinematographer and director of photography who currently calls Los Angeles home. He studied film at Escuela de Cine de Uruguay, the premier and first ever Uruguayan institution dedicated specifically to professional training in film and video. Pedro graduated in 2004 and quickly made a name for himself in the cinematography world and is now represented by the acclaimed Iconic Talent Agency. As a member of the renowned Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, Pedro is best known for his work on films such as Extinction, Don't Breathe, The Girl in the Spider's Web, and most recently for the historically inspired thriller that we'll be talking about today, Antebellum. His brilliant work is not just centered around cinematography for feature films. Pedro has also lended his creative vision to commercials, music videos, and documentaries. He's a visual master who is capable of evoking precise emotions in his work of cinematic genius. Welcome today, Pedro Luque.
Thank you very much. I'm completely blushing right now. Thank you.
You got to own that.
Well, thank you very much. I will. I try.
Yes, no, I'm super excited. So I actually got to watch the film and was really blown away, especially by, as a photographer myself, I'm of course in love with lighting. So there was a lot of things I wanted to talk to you about. But before we get into the meat of the movie and how you shot that, I would love to know what drew you to cinematography in the first place.
Well, it's weird because I don't know how I ended up, but I was always kind of directing myself into visual something, right? My dad is an architect, and I always drawing. You know, we always had paper and stuff. And my dad is a very good. He now paints, and he taught me some stuff. And then I was into one of the things that he did. My mom too, but. My dad owed me some money, believe it or not. I was a very hardworking kid. And I lended some money to him. And because he couldn't pay me back, he gave me his camera. He gave me like a Canon FT. It was a film camera with a 50 and a zoom. So I was into the music scene, playing hardcore punk and following my friends' bands. And I started photographing that. And I was always very interested in comic books. And at one point we said, well, there was another friend and said like, what we should do, you know, when you're 18 and you need to choose what you're going to be the rest of your life, which is one of the most stupid things that I can think
pressure,
of.
Right?
Yeah, right. You're 18. Okay, now what are you going to do the rest of all those years that you still have for? And we ended up landing on film school, right? It was kind of a conscious choice, you know. We had like, okay, sequential storytelling in comic books, you know, music, painting, and on film school I did everything, right? I was already working because I got my first job as a prop assistant in 1999. Believe it or not, I was 18, and the place where I was going to learn how to paint. My teacher, my mentor, he got the opportunity to do the production design on a movie, and this is Uruguay, which is very small, and you know, at that time it wasn't that so developed as it is now, which is a little bit more. And he told me, hey, you're starting film school. Don't you want to come and work with me on this movie? And I said, like, yeah, sure, for free, obviously. You know? And
Sure,
I couldn't
yeah.
believe it. And there was this DP here. There was there was a DP there named Pato Rodriguez, which is he had made movies with Eliseo Subiela, which is an Argentinian director, and he was so loving with the camera and the lighting, and I was like, look at that guy, he cares. And I remember we were shooting that movie in Betacam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember knowing that the Betacam was a piece of shit. It wasn't a real camera. And the guy was treating, and all the crew was treating the camera as a real camera. And I was like, wait, it's not just about, the gear you may have. Because the movie looked amazing. I will go. And that guy started to teach me some stuff. He will say like, hey, Pedro, come over here. Now you have to do this and that. Look at the monitor and check that. And I learned a little bit with that guy. And then on film school, I was already like, and I think I felt comfortable with the camera and the lights, and I worked a lot. There weren't many cinematographers on my film school. I think we were like 2 or 3 that were actually super dedicated to it, and I ended up like shooting like 20 short films when I came out of film school.
Wow.
So it was quite an experience. Imagine, but I had like 1 minute of semi-interesting images, right? And I condensed all those images together. It's like the other we were kidding with a friend. It's like our anti-reel. It's way bigger than our reel, right? All the things we did wrong, that's huge. But well, I got 1 minute of stuff, and I came out and started to and the same guy, the same DP. I was doing everything because I worked as an AD, I worked as a PA, of course, I worked as a camera assistant. And at one point, this guy told me, like, I was working as a location manager at that point.
Okay.
And this DP friend, mentor, he told me, hey, if you really want to be a director of photography, the next time they call you for one of those things you are doing now, you should tell them that you are working as a cinematographer, right? I was like 24, and I went like, okay. They call me and I say that, and it's like, do you want to see my reel? And they went, yeah, send it over, right? And after a couple attempts, it started to happen. Like people like Fede Alvarez, he was starting to be a director, starting to work. I have crossed him. He was an editor on this company, and he was starting on this kind of new production company, and he wanted to have people of his age, working with him.
Sure.
And we had the opportunity of shooting a lot of commercials and do a lot of crazy stuff. But I ended up being a cinematographer. It was good.
That's crazy. I love hearing these stories of how people come to be where they're at when I interview them, because sometimes it's, I always knew what I wanted to be since the time I was a little kid. And sometimes it's that just kind of happened that way. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I imagine you're not too upset with where you're at though.
No. I love it. It's tough though. It's a tough job. But I think there's nothing I would do. I wouldn't wake up at 4 a.m. for anything else. Maybe family, but
yeah,
but
maybe.
But anything else, and then they say like, okay, your call is at 4:30, and I was discussing this with a friend yesterday also, like we were talking about the morning light and how beautiful is it, right? And I was saying like, the amount of times I tortured people with that, because I've overheard, what the fuck, 4 a.m. call? Who the fuck is coming up with these times? And I'm like,
I don't know, not me.
we need to have the techno ready in the middle of the forest for sunrise.
Yeah.
But then at the end, it's worth it. It's going to live forever. The picture.
Yeah, exactly. And that
tough.
actually leads me into the first question that I had about Antebellum. So the first thing I noticed, of course, with the opening of the film is this long single shot. And I
Oh
thought
yeah.
that it was such a great, so you start in the beginning and there's this beautiful little girl running through this idyllic scene that's lit by this beautiful sunset light, and it just feels so gorgeous. And then you slowly kind of transform as we're going through to this really kind of hideous, where in the movie where the slaves are living, where there's this, you know, the light is changed, there's no more glowing golden light, everything is now much more diffuse, and the color palette is much kind of lower and more somber. And how hard was it to get that shot, and what was it like planning for not just the long shot and all of the movement, but also that change in light?
Yeah, it was pretty tough. We had a great assistant director with a lot of experience, and we actually tried that shot like 4 days in a row. Um, these are two shots stitched together, sadly. But I mean, sometimes, you know, I shot a movie that is a single shot, a sequence shot, horror film that we shot in 2009. It was a horror film, and it was like 11 shots put together. And there was always that discussion: oh, how difficult it is to do this very long shot. And I always think that the difficulty of doing it, it's something that it's more like interesting for us technicians, in a way, you know, that we know how difficult it is to move a camera and coordinate all that people, and coordinate all the elements and the sun and the light, and but in the end, I think what's important is the what the audience feels, right? That I think
Right.
that a continuous take has that thing, that tension that keeps on growing and growing, because it's kind of related to, I don't know if you read that book, In the Blink of an Eye, the Walter Murch book about
I
editing and
haven't.
sound editing. He discovered, he was the editor of Coppola, and he would do sound. He's a genius, total genius. And he discovered that editing, that usually when he was going to make the cut, like the scene, okay, this shot is over here, it was when, or about when the actor was about to blink, right? And he started to make this connection between how we blink in normal life. And he says, like, okay, when you're panning your eyes, you usually blink in the middle, because that's information, and that's a cut in a way. You know, you cut from this scene to that scene. And another thing he did is, like, it's like when actors act, right? And or when someone is like really mad and he knows exactly what he wants to say, he doesn't blink, and he's like that. But when someone is really mad and he's confused, he's constantly blinking. And I think that a continuous shot has that thing. You're not blinking, you know, you're like put into
Right.
that thing and going all the way, and it starts to build up and build up and build up. So we tried this shot for 4 days. We obviously we found that path was the best. I was interested in doing something that the camera doesn't move much. It's like a straight line.
Right.
The camera goes straight. I mean, things happen, but the
Yeah.
camera is kind of unfazed and goes straight to where it has to be, which is this lady that's trying to escape. And we found that straight line at certain point of the day, at certain time, the sun was there, right? So it gave us this beautiful beginning with this huge house. This is a real slave plantation. The
Wow.
cabins we used weren't the real cabins, because you are not allowed to use that for
Sure.
real. It's a memorial. It's really, when you
Right.
get into these
Right.
cabins, it's like it's a feeling that's it's pretty heavy. So we
Yeah.
built these exactly replicas of those other cabins right on our path. And yeah, after you go through that facade of happiness, you start to see the real thing that's going on behind that thing, you know, which is the antebellum South,
Right.
that romanticism of that time, you know. And yeah, at the beginning, it feels like, oh, look, oh, nature, and you know, there are horses, and the directors who are so smart, they put geese and you know,
Yeah.
peacocks, and then we go through that, and then suddenly the military kind of takes you, and then you start seeing these enslaved people working there, and suddenly it gets grimmer and grimmer and grimmer until you hear the screams of this lady. And when you get there, she has a freedom path. The sun is in the background there,
Right.
waiting for her, but it's a waning sun, right? It's going away, and well, she decides to go, and that's then it's like, well, things happen, but it was tough. We were lucky, but also we worked hard because we did every day we were attempting to do that shot at the end of the day, right? I was like, okay, we try again, and it was a movie, right? A movie held by two people. The movie thing, with an Alexa Mini, and we were using these lenses, which are very particular, which are the lenses used for Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
Like the real lenses, rehoused by Panavision, right?
Oh, wow.
And that's all those flares and that kind of weird thing it's coming from this glass. And there are a couple tricks. You go through some like hedge, how do you say hedge, like fence or bushes.
Right.
The camera goes through, and those are VFX because we needed to actually have a path for the camera. And there are it was a lot of work of coordination,
Yeah.
and Janelle, the actress, had to actually be we had a stunt double going on a horse, and then we had to do a cowboy switch and put Janelle in a very specific position because the camera then turns to her. That's in the camera path, which is like a straight long line. There's one turn, which is to see Janelle's face. Camera goes. Suddenly you follow someone on a horse. Someone is slumping on a horse, and then that disappears. And then when you pick out again, it's her, and then the soldiers come, and then all that madness happens later. But it was great. I'm very proud of that one.
No, it was a really beautiful shot. And was that all? How much of that was practical lighting, and how much did you have to add? Everything. Okay, good. That's what I was wondering. I felt like, as I was watching the movie, was it a lot of practical lighting?
In this movie in particular, I wanted to do as much practical lighting as I could. There are some, like Asteras, these like the LED tubes that you can program with your phone. There are some lights, and also there are there is some crazy stuff. But for the practical lights, the fire and the flame bars and the candles, we were doing it practical, and I wanted just to use the nice lenses. So I ended up mixing anamorphic and sphericals. So at night, weirdly, it's mostly anamorphic with the super high speed anamorphics from Panavision that I think there are like 1.8, 1.4. They're pretty fast lenses, which are completely weird and super with a lot of character, we can say. There's like aberrations all over the place.
Right.
And then we had a T1 lens, which was a Nikon lens rehoused by Panavision, and that was used at night because I knew that I wanted to use fire and little things for that. For the night scenes, it's a funny story that I started to search into painters, as we all do, which I recommend, even though if it sounds snobby and sounds pretentious, we should always do, no matter the size of the project. Look at those classic painters. So I found this Peter van Broek. It's like a Belgian painter, right? I wanted to have a night that wasn't blue, right?
Okay.
Or not that blue. Not your typical, bright blue night, but something a little bit less evident. So we found this guy, and that guy used to have like a moon in all his paintings, right? And I was like, wow, but that has the moon. The moon is great. Look at that moon. And we were always like, but look at that moon there. And we ended up, I remember we were driving, we drove by a place that they were selling bouncy trampolines, right? And I went like, what if we asked the Greeks to buy one of these trampolines and put like full grid on it, and we have a moon. We hang it from a crane. We put a light behind, and we put it on a crane there. And I was asking the gaffer, right, Chip Carey in New Orleans. I was like, Chip, do you think this is too crazy? And he was like, I don't think so. Let's go for it. Yeah. And the group were like, done. That's great. And they actually built one. They didn't buy the trampoline. They actually built one. Yeah. And it was like a 15-foot diameter moon that we had on a crane. And so it was like, okay, let's put the moon over there. And the moon will go like, okay, a little bit higher. Okay, that's perfect. Leave the moon there. And then it needed a lot of VFX. It was a little bit of a problem later because it looked rounded, but it didn't look like a moon, right? So they had to, do some stuff to it. But it did lead those deep background stuff. And all the moons you see in the movie is that thing, And it's pretty believable.
Crazy.
I mean, yeah.
That's crazy. I love that though. As a photographer, and a lot of the audience is photographers, I know we are so used to just coming up with whatever we can come up with to make things work. And it's strangely comforting to know that even on films with these budgets that most of us could never dream of, you're still like figuring stuff out, and let's just hang that up there and light it and use it to be our moon.
That was super. That was kind of crazy. I didn't know we could pull that up, but it worked. And also the rest of the rest of the scenes are lit with so little lights that you wouldn't believe it. I think the gaffer came up with this crate box, like normal size crate, with a bunch of Christmas lights around, and we will hang that thing from the trees to give a little bit of feel,
Yeah.
It worked perfectly. And then the rest was a lot of torches, a lot of candles, and a lot of fire in general.
Yeah, I noticed that. I remember seeing a lot of the close-ups and thinking the light was so beautiful. And I was trying to figure out as I was watching how much of it was practical and how much of it was added. I'm like, God, this really looks just natural, like so natural. I have to know. So I'm actually really glad to know that, because I think for photographers, there's always this feeling of like, if we're not adding or using the coolest lights, then it's not going to be a really fantastic shot. When the truth is really the light that gives you the feel that you want, whether it's added or practical, is really the right way to go.
Yeah, there's a thin line there, because what you're talking, I think it's also, how expressive is the picture, right? Because you have to say something with the picture, but also at the same time, there's some kind of romantic side to it, that you have to romanticize something, because it's okay, because it's kind of the however your mind thinks about things. You want to have some kind of heightened feeling to it, right? So sometimes we tend to make things beautiful, right? Which may not be the right solution for everything, but also at the same time, let's not forget the power of beautiful. Beautiful, it's a good thing, it's beauty. It's something that's relatable in a way. I think you see beauty and you have that weird warm feel. I don't know, obviously everyone's taste it's different, but a good composition with balanced lighting and 3D feel always kind of work in a way. Obviously, in the expression of a movie where you're expressing a story, beautiful is not always the answer. Sometimes it's ugly, or sometimes it's upsetting, or sometimes it's something else. But still, there is a thing of trying to use the tools to create that vision that you are you have in your mind, but sometimes they are not needed. They are just tools, right? And every tool has it's like you cannot use a Phillips star screwdriver to unscrew a flat head screwdriver, and that's kind of it. I mean, you can use a knife.
Yeah. That's true. That's actually a really good point.
Yeah. I don't know. It's fun.
Yes, yes, agreed. So, which leads me into a whole bunch of other questions I wanted to ask. But first, as you were describing kind of setting up this shot, and I'm remembering watching it, do you think that that shot set the tone for the rest of the movie? Because I definitely feel like, I don't know if you know this story, during the filming of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and Gene Wilder said, I want to fall in the beginning. He wanted to come out with this limp and then jump up and be like, oh, look, no limp for me. And his point was, I need to set the tone for the fact that you will never believe anything Willy Wonka does. Like, you'll never know, do I believe him or do I not believe him? Is he fooling? Is he not
That's
fooling?
brilliant.
Yeah, I thought so too. And that just reminded me of this beginning shot where we see this contrast and we have this setup for like things are going to get dark and things are going to get dark. And, you know, do you feel when you were setting that up, were you thinking of that in terms of like setting the tone for the rest of the film, or how did you come up with that shot in the first place?
I don't know if we were. I don't know if we were thinking exactly on that, right? I think it's a very intuitive work what we do, and sometimes we make decisions that they are difficult to consciously explain, right? Because the medium it explains itself, right? You don't explain a movie, you just watch it, or you don't.
Right.
It's like trying to explain a color to a blind person. It's difficult, you know. Yeah, it's warm. I don't know, but there was a clear intention of connecting those two ends, right? The beautiful end with the horrifying end. There was also the music is fantastic, and the music adds to that tension. But I don't know, but the music came later. Yeah, but at the same time, it's like a synergic thing that fits of itself, right? But there wasn't at least consciously the feeling of, okay, let's make this the most ominous thing that we can think of, right? There was the will of connecting those ends and make them live in the same space without cutting, right? Okay, this is the one thing. And also the idea of connecting those spaces spatially, you know, this is not that far away from each other, right? The lady of the house and the lady that wants to escape,
right?
It's also like it's kind of, these are two faces, you know, and they live together. But you're right. I think in the end, the it's like the Willy Wonka thing is like saving the cat, you know, that theory of that the hero has to save the cat in the first movie, so then you like him for the rest of the movie.
Right.
It is a little bit of that in the cinematography sense, that it's kind of a slippery slope. The movie has a little bit of a I don't know, it ends well or something like that, maybe. But yes, it is a slope. Yes, it's pretty. Well, it has that twist. Also. I don't know. I don't want to spoil it. All right.
And I try not to give too much away. I really love that you mentioned that there's that element to it that is instinctual, because I'm also a writer. And so there are times where I'll be writing a novel and I'll get to the end and realize I've included these things in the beginning that I was not thinking of at the time that end up tying everything together at the end. And I don't know if that's from our kind of collective psyche of the history of storytelling, that it's just kind of built in there. But I love that you brought that up, because I do think as creators, that's something inherent that's in here. You kind of know how you want to tell a story, and sometimes your instinct proves that it's really deep rooted.
Yeah, well, I feel like sometimes you have to charge instinct, right? And how you charge instinct? You charge instinct by feeding it with all the things that you think that may be correct for whatever you're doing. In your case, I'm sure you were thinking of your story 24/7, right?
Right.
I think sometimes I met many writers that are like, when they're thinking of something, they kind of disconnect. They are always thinking about that. Everything that happens. I mean, they may be talking to you, but then in the end, in the back of their heads, there's a little machine moving gears about that story, right? And I'm sure all that gets saved on that memory. And then when you are connected to your medium, which is writing or photography, that comes out. But also, I believe that you can charge it. You know, you can like add things that are gonna appear later, and it's more. Also, I mean, it's hard to listen to your instincts because I consider myself a very rational person, but and for a rational person, you always need some kind of justification for your acts, right? Why I'm doing this and why I'm asking for that, or why I feel like, and sometimes there's no enough computing power to explain a decision, right? And I tend to believe that that's coming from your instinct, but also I learned to listen to my instinct and say, okay, it sounds a little bit hippie, right? And I'm trying, I try not to be like that, but I am. So it sounds like, okay, you know, Pedro, you know what's best. You may be wrong, but in the case when you are deciding something, you have to make a decision, right? Because you're the cinematographer, the writer, the director, whatever you do in life. At one point, you have to take a decision and say, okay, this is what we should do. And I try to stop and say, okay, your body knows, you know, if there's something that's wrong, there's something that's wrong. Maybe you cannot explain it, or if there's something that rings a bell of sparks joy, you know, it kind of sparks joy, and you should listen to it. Sometimes it's difficult because at the same time, that decision or that action that you take is kind of driven by the ego, which is a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, because you have to always be, or at least how I think, I'm always kind of checking on my ego. It's okay, it's my ego getting in the middle of this thing, you know, and messing with this thing is something that makes me feel whatever, vulnerable or less than someone else, or less macho, or less intelligent, or less whatever. And I try to say, okay, no, let's try not to, you know, that ego mess with whatever we are doing. Let's make the best for the movie. But at the same time, at one point, you need to be confident enough to say, oh no, you know what, guys, what we're doing is this. We're going to hang that 18 from that building on the 18th floor out of that window. And they're going to go like, that's going to take 5 hours of reading. And I said, we need it. You know?
Yeah.
And at that point, it's tough. But if also at the same time, it's okay. Well, that's what we do. If you put that light there and doesn't work, you go like, you know, that light, it's great. Let's kill it.
Like, nice work. Don't need it anymore.
Well
Take
done.
it down.
Thank you for that. But yeah, so I think it's yeah, you can recharge your instincts with the proper materials. What I do is I research. I go to Shot Deck or Film Grab and start looking for movies that may be similar to the one I'm doing, or I liked at one point for something particular. I start going through the frames and I save those frames, put them in a big work space, or print them, you know, go to CVS and print them in photo paper, and then have them around, and that stays in, you know, it stays in. And also the other thing that I wrapped yesterday, Don't Breathe 2, right?
Oh, okay.
We shot the second one.
Wow.
And it was super fun. It was super good. And we wrapped yesterday. I am in Detroit right now, in a hotel in Detroit. And every time I would watch a movie during production, at the next day I would come with something. I was like, wait, what were you watching? You know, like I watched Goodfellas, and suddenly we were
just
Steadicam starts outside of the there's no bar in this scene. Okay.
Dang it.
Let's do something else.
Do you find that there's a way? So I 100% agree with you on this idea of kind of like charging or priming the pump or kind of getting yourself ready to live in that headspace. Do you ever find that it starts to contaminate your vision, or how do you stop other people's visions from kind of coming in and taking over how you would be making something?
It's what I call the popular movement of making movies syndrome. Because what I tell everyone, and I really believe this, is when I'm meeting, the camera assistant, the gaffer, the grip, obviously the director, and for sure. But I tell them, you tell me everything you see. You tell me if you have an idea. Tell me if you go like the camera operator. If you go like, I think we should do this, tell me, don't save anything. In a way, because I can steal those ideas, but also because I know that they know, these people, the crew have done hundreds of movies, right? They usually like movies. They like what they do. And maybe those ideas, maybe they're not the correct thing for the movie, because you always have to kind of keep that macro vision of what's the movie for you, but maybe they spark something else, right? And ideas, they come and go. You cannot cling too strongly to an idea. One thing came and you grabbed it and it was great, and went away, and then you have to create another one. It's like, and that's a never-ending process. So you better start training that muscle, of creating new shit. Because if not, if you have not many tricks, you're not gonna last long. So I tell them, but I know that in the end it's my responsibility, right? And that's when kind of that instinctual thing comes along, because I tell them, to the crew, you tell me whatever you see, but don't expect me to listen that much to you. I may go like, yeah, that's perfect, or I may go like, no, that's bullshit, or I may go like, let me think about that one. That one sounds good. I'm also a little bit flexible on set. I'm not very I plan a lot, mostly in prep, to know how's the field, right? Just to know the battlefield. Like if I'm building a set, I grab the plans and I bring mock-ups of technocranes, and I have my scale meters, and I know every angle that where we can put the camera to see this and that. But then when I'm there on the set, I'm a little bit more chaotic, but we make our days. We make our days perfectly, and it usually looks good. But I think you have to always kind of keep that line, that kind of instinctual line of what you think is good for the movie, and try to learn how to listen to yourself, without being an asshole.
That's a good
which is
good
very
key
important, because
you're working with a team.
Nobody's going to share any ideas with you.
True. So do you think that there's something in deciding which things to take and which things to discard, that is where your taste comes into play? Like, because obviously it's one thing if we're copying something shot for shot, right? Like that's taking somebody else's thing. But if you're taking bits and pieces from everywhere, then it's part of your vision that decides, well, this piece works or this piece doesn't. And maybe even if you're heavily influenced, what you decide to keep and what you decide to throw away ultimately comes down to who you are as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, Tarantino grabs scenes from every movie he likes and recreates them, and nobody's gonna say like, "Hey, Tarantino, you're a thief," because because I mean, and this is something my dad always says: when you copy something, right? Let's say you want to copy the Mona Lisa, it's not easy, right? To copy the Mona Lisa, And most sure, it's not gonna be like the Mona Lisa. It's gonna be something else. Yeah, maybe your appropriation of the Mona Lisa or your interpretation of the Mona Lisa or whatever. But mostly sure, it's not gonna be exactly the same unless you're a professional painter that does that for life. But
Right.
but so my dad always said, like, you know what, copy stuff. If you see something you like, go copy it. And by copying, you kind of do the same process that guy did, or obviously a little bit faster, maybe not as thorough that he went through, right? But maybe you catch little things of that technique or that special, like that kind of lighting, or you saw, that or that thing, and that ends up being, and it ends up having a new signification. It ends up being new because the weather was different that day, or whatever. You didn't have that same. You weren't shooting in Kodak EXR 100 daylight film
Right.
score. We were using a Red or an Alexa or a 5D or whatever. And but I think if you care and if you love it enough and you are thorough what you do, you probably have a new thing there, even though that you were copying. But at the end, you finish. You don't copy anymore. You just you.
Right. That's such a good point. Some of our audience today, Kelly Robitaille, who is a photographer and digital artist in Canada, she says that she's actually writing about this for her presentation next week, about how taking inspirations from other people's work and then twisting it to make it your own thing, which I think it seems like in the beginning, when you're first learning, that's when you are kind of copying without really understanding how you can take those things. But hopefully through the journey, by the end, you're taking them and going, okay, I can make this work for what I want, rather than I just want to make what those people are making.
Yeah. I think, what, sometimes, mostly I see it in commercials, right? Some that we copy a lot. I mean, I don't work in many commercials lately. I would like to do more because it takes less time than a movie. This
Sure.
movie I just wrapped took me like 5 months.
Right.
And but I think that there's something of value on mindless copying anyway. You have to know that you are copying. It cannot be something that oh yeah, this is what I'm an artist. This is what I do, and you are copying.
Right.
You cannot be true to yourself and say yeah, I'm trying to look like that. And because when I remember when I did, this was my second movie. Yeah, my second movie, this horror film that was a single shot horror film, right? We were shooting a commercial with this director, and it was like a crappy commercial for a chocolate thing in Uruguay, right? 3 million people country in South America. We are like looking at this chocolate turn around, and we are like, oh, man, we need to make a movie, man. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? And it was good anyway. And suddenly a friend of mine, a producer, came back from England. He was on a festival, and he said, like, listen, I met this producer, probably a pirate producer, but I met this producer, and he said, nobody cares about those routine movies, those movies about normal life in Uruguay. Now, if you get me a horror film, horror is kind of universal. I'm sure we could sell that one. And the guy came back to Uruguay and said, like, hey guys, we need to do a horror film. Look. And we were like, all right, let's do a horror film. And this director, who's brilliant, is a Uruguayan director. He works over there. He came up with an idea. And before HD, there was a world, and we were thinking all the time of getting 10 cans of 16 millimeters film, right? And shoot a movie in 10 days with 10 shots. right?
Wow.
9-minute shots. We left 2 minutes for maybe if it's a false start there. And we said like, yeah, we're gonna do that movie. And this guy said, okay, let's do a horror film with this new camera that your friend has, 5D, and we just do a single shot. We shoot it, and we shot it in 4 days. This thing, and it went to Cannes, and it got remade in the US. But for that movie, as a DP, it was a big challenge. But also, I wanted to be genre. I wanted to look like a horror film. And I had to copy, what, and I went like, okay, what we need, and it was kind of let's do a horror film. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna do my art, I'm gonna be
Right.
myself through the pictures. No. It was like, let's make it look like those Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
And even though it was a little bit mindless, it worked, and eventually paved the road for something else. Nothing comes like that.
Right. No, that's such a good point. And actually brings me to another one of the questions I wanted to ask, but there's definitely these visual markers, I think, that cue people into what to expect from something and how they should feel about something. And yeah, you really come up with those on your own. That's kind of part of our general visual understanding of the world. Like, we know kind of what horror films look like, and we know kind of what action films look like. And there's definitely something to, okay, let's make it look this way, because then people know what they're getting from us and they know how to feel about it.
Yeah.
And so that makes a lot of sense, which actually leads me to one of the questions I wanted to ask. So when you're making some of the creative decisions about how you want a film to look, like I noticed, the color palette in this film, really earthy tones, very subdued. How do you go about making those decisions? Are you kind of relying on some of these industry standard, like if we're going to do a Western, it's going to be a little washed out, and it's going to, or if we're going to do it, we're going to have lots of saturated colors. Like, is it some of that? How do you go about making those decisions?
Well, I always try to break it, right? To try to go a different way, do something else. But at the same time, it's a tough thing, because I know that we are working in a certain space that kind of gives you that. In the case of this horror film we shot, I was very specific about, okay, let's look horror film. It was an abandoned house, very dark, and there was this girl on a tank top, and and this kind of monster, other people, and that kind of takes you to a place without even you. I mean, it kind of made no sense to make that bright, right? I mean, there's no mystery, there's no something lurking in the shadows. It's a horror film, you need to be a little bit afraid or scared. In the case of Antebellum, like the jumping, 12 years after, there is some of those visual cues for the genre, for the period, right? Like you cannot escape to costume design. You cannot escape to the production design. It gives you something that's already there. It will be not, I don't know if, I mean, maybe it would be a really nice exercise to do, but having the wardrobe being super colorful would be a little bit weird. It gets colorful in Antebellum, but not in the period part, and that kind of leads you to some places that may be cliche or common or stereotype, right? At the same time, I'm not scared of cliches, and I'm not scared of stereotypes, because when you're telling a story, as a writer, you need to use those symbols that represent certain things to be clear about that story, right? But I always try anyway to break it in some way. At some point, you may find there are some scenes that are like, this is a little bit different to what I'm used to. right? And
Right.
at least in my work, right? Uh, Look, this has a different thing. At the same time, I think the story leads you. Story
Right.
leads you. You know, when we shot The Girl in the Spider's Web, it was about this hacker in Sweden, which is very grand. Everything is kind of grand, and also it's very precise and very uh, hard and very sterile in a way. We shot it with an Alexa 65 with, you know, prime 65 lenses. It's like, uh, but this other movie, you know, for Antebellum, I wanted to have something that was super organic and kind of noisy and grainy. So I ended up
Right.
forcing the Alexa to 1600 ISO and using these very old lenses. Also, I wanted to do something that I never did before, that was deep focus, to have everything sharp. And I called the guys at Panavision and I spoke with Dan Sasaki. He helped me. That I told him, like, hey, I need to do deep focus, but I don't want any lens that's resembling to anything modern, because once you go past T8 or T11, everything looks so sharp in digital that it's not nice.
Right.
And I'm like, we are like, I don't know, I need very old lenses than like the lenses used for going with the wind. And he was like, oh yeah, we have them here. I was like, what? Yeah, they're here. There's some shelf there. There are two sets in the world. One is at Panavision, and the other one Paul Thomas Anderson has, and that's what they told me, right? And I ended up bringing those lenses, which all the way top down didn't look that sharp. They're sharp and kind of sharp anyway. Uh, and that was because of the story. I wanted to have deep focus because I knew that we are in a cotton field, and I wanted to have a person here and a person here, and that window over there, having someone there, and having like 300 yards away another guy working the land, to kind of let the audience see, you know, what's around, and not, because with selective focus it's very easy to tell them what to look at, right? You won't look
Right.
anything that's blurred. You just go to whatever is sharp.
It's a little bit pushy, right? That selective
Yeah,
focus. Like you're kind of controlling everybody
yeah.
that
You're
way.
gonna look at that eye, not this
Right.
eye, that eye.
Yeah. No, that's a really great point.
But I think
Um,
it's kind of driven by the story, because cinematography, at least how I see it, it needs to help the story develop. If it goes, I mean, no cinematography ever saved a movie, right? Um,
if the story
it
was
it
bad.
exactly.
Right.
But it helps. It helps, and if the story is good, it can amplify greatly. You know, the thing.
Right.
And but I think they have to go together. You know, they kind of go two separated paths, because it becomes, I don't know though. I'm very flexible. I mean, maybe the next movie I'll face it like, okay, let's do whatever. We're gonna go against everything in this one.
So
And
that
maybe more.
actually that brings up a really interesting question, which I did actually have written down, and I'm sure a lot of people will be curious about. Where does, and I know that there are some directors who work very, very closely with their cinematographers and it's really collaborative. I know that there's some directors who are very, very specific on what they want, and then the cinematographer just carries that out. How does that work for you specifically with Antebellum? But do you find that in films you have a lot of control, or do you find that it's much more collaborative?
Um, I like collaboration per starters, right? And it's like, okay, this is a collaborative art. It's a big team. We spend a lot of time together, and we need to collaborate to make this happen. But in the particular case of Antebellum, the two directors uh, were these guys that didn't have any experience on making a movie, right? They didn't know anything about making a movie, but they are brilliant people that have great ideas, and really courageous people that go forward with what they want, right? And I love that. When I see that in a person, I really like it. When someone fights for what they want, for real, with smart, right? Not just fighting for fighting. Um, But they didn't have much experience doing this kind of stuff. So I had to take a lot of control on the movie. And I told you, I had this assistant director that he was brilliant. He's brilliant, and he helped us to make the movie a lot. You know, he was one of those assistant directors that said, like, Pedro, if you don't like the light, we should stop. We shouldn't shoot it. We just wait, because it's pointless to do. I mean, look at all these resources. We're gonna do something wrong, you know. An idea that tells you that. And also, he understood exactly what we were talking about when we were talking about doing deep focus, and he gave us those big plateaus with a lot of upstage and downstage, you know. But it was basically him and me that took the load of the specific technical movie making stuff, and it was my job to translate these guys' ideas into something that you could see on the screen. They had a lot of ideas about shots, a lot of shots that they saw them, and it was a matter of like, okay, give me your head, okay, we're gonna put this onto the camera, and it worked beautiful. But in this particular case, I had a lot of control on what we were doing. I told them, obviously, because I want to make their vision a reality and not pursue my own agenda. But they were okay with it, you know. And I showed them pictures of what I thought it was correct, and they loved it. And we spoke about that long shot at the beginning, how to connect those two worlds, and it was very collaborative. But on the ideas level, at one point we had a lot of discussions. Also, I love these guys, and we ended up being really good friends. But we had a lot of discussions. At one point, I had to tell them, like, listen, I cannot tell you everything I'm gonna do, because we simply don't have time for that. You'll have to. This is a trust position you're putting me. You have to trust. You will have to trust in me. And they were like, okay. But it worked. They love it, and I think it worked for the movie, which is for me the most important thing, right?
Sure.
To make it work and make you enjoy the movie. And also, these are people, these two directors, that they really appreciate art, and they're very intelligent people that love all of the art. So they like beautiful too.
Right.
Even so, and it was like, okay, I think there's something about the clash of beautiful and horrifying here, you know.
Right.
Because there is, you know, you see, there's something, and I think it speaks about the clash that we have with all these things, you know, about how it's a weird translation, but something has to do with it, about that clash, you know, this horrifying thing happening in this beautiful world. I think in some level you understand that, you know.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, there were scenes that were absolutely stunningly shot and beautifully lit, like with the tent scene with all the candles, and there's this atmosphere in the air, and, you know, the photographer side of me is like, oh, like getting really excited about the possibilities of what you can shoot in there. And then the part of me that's watching the film is just going through that period of kind of disgust and like revulsion at what's happening in this scene. And it definitely, I think it increases that the tension, but also the sense of disconnect. Like, this should not be a thing, right?
Yeah. Totally. There's a clash there, and I think one of the ideas of the movie, or one of the things that the movie wants to do, or the directors want to do, Chris and Gerard, is to clash a little bit, you know, to
Right.
make to start talking about stuff, even though, and to be, to talk about it. Sometimes I feel like we need to talk more. That's it. We need to,
Yeah.
even though that talk itself may not yield results immediately, it will eventually. Sometimes it happens to me when I talk with someone, and we all have our ideas, and we are like, and suddenly, well, then you go home, and when you have a little bit of time for you, if you can find time for you, which is also something I think we're missing a little bit, then you think about it, and it's like, yeah, maybe, right? and that's it. That's good enough.
Yeah, no, sometimes just planting the seeds and letting those grow at some point is the most important thing. So for the kind of, when does your job actually start? Like, are you coming in during storyboarding process to talk with the director about how to kind of, what camera movements can work for their vision? Or are you coming in at a later time? How does that work?
Usually it depends on the director, right? But usually I start, like, let's say if we have 2-3 months of shooting, we should have like 2.5 months of prepping or something.
Right.
Like that. So sometimes the directors, obviously they start before, because they start with the script, with the studio, but then when we move to an office to do hard prep, I'm there from the beginning. And yeah, I draw a lot. So for me, it's easy to communicate with drawings, right? Which sometimes are faster than words, and say like, oh, the camera is low here against the thing, blah, blah, blah. And with a little drawing, okay, it's this. Okay, perfect, yeah. And I get really involved. It depends on the director. Obviously, there are some directors are more clear about what they want. Some, they love the camera, some they hate the camera, and they like the actors, and it's when you build a crew. Also, you build a crew depending on who this director is, because maybe you need a stronger camera operator, or maybe a camera operator that's more like a technical guy that needs to be told exactly what to do, or you need a very creative one to help with some of the stuff, and so with all the positions that you end up filling, right, for a movie. And so it has a little bit of kind of managerial side, but at the same time, I'm constantly feeding them with pictures and camera movements, and we talk about, I mean, this is very cliche and everyone says it, but I think it's important anyway. We talk about music, about movies, about books, about everything that may be charging that intuition that we're gonna need. Because then when you jump into the shoot, you're like a soldier, and you need to get your training and say like, okay, soldier,
right,
what now? Now we put the camera there, and it's like you have to react, and there's no time for hesitating too much. There's some time, but not too much, right? You need to make those hours effective. This is a very expensive medium,
sure.
and we have so many things involved, and the logistics are mind-boggling. So, but at the same, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I trust the crew, right, in that sense, of the ADs or the producers. But I try to get, as soon as I can, try to draw as much as we can. But at the same time, I know that usually we throw the storyboards before starting the day. We go like, and then we get to shoot, because everything changes,
right.
And the actors are a very important piece of that thing, and I like them to have room, and after, it's not until you block the scene that you know exactly, or almost exactly, how you want to shoot it, right? It's good if you can go the extra step and go to the location a day before and take 20 half hour or 1 hour on that set to think about it, because usually when you think better stuff comes up. The more you put your mind into something, the better results you will get. It's like, it's a matter of quantity. It's put as many hours as you can. Obviously, we all need time off, and we all need to rest. That's for sure. Nobody works well exhausted. But the more you can do, the better. And I really believe in prep.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have just kind of two final questions as we're coming to the end of this hour. And I one that I always ask everybody, so I'll set that aside. But so for gear, I know a lot of people are really interested in, personally, my focus is always on vision, because I feel like the vision comes first and the gear serves it. But is there any particular lenses or cameras that you find yourself coming back to often, that you feel like serve your vision or fit your creative style more than others?
Well, the gear, it's an important part of this. It's kind of this craft. Sometimes the gear is the language, right? The method is the language. You cannot, it's like, if you want to make an oil painting, you cannot use watercolors. You have to use oil. So when you decide that you're gonna use a technocrane, it's gonna be one of those technocrane kind of movies, because there's so much stuff that you can do. But or if you decide not to have a technocrane, you know that you're gonna have certain style to the camera work. Let's say, okay, let's do it from the dolly. Let's do all dolly moves, or not. Let's do it from sticks, and it's gonna be. We have to find that really good shot that entertains you for 25 seconds, or 1 minute, or 10 minutes, or whatever. So I think the gear, it's part of the vision in a way, right? Not entirely, because I remember when we shot this movie, the horror film, the single shot horror film, we did that with a 5D because it was what we had. And it doesn't matter which camera we used. We could have used another camera. The thing that was an idea there, and the camera served its purpose. But I end up using Alexa all the time, Alexa Mini. Lately, I'm trying to push it a little more and more and more and more. I'm like in 1600 ISO and 2000 ISO. 2000, I don't remember the things. Yeah, 2000, then to 2580, I don't remember. But usually Alexa, usually lately anamorphic. This last movie we shot with the Hawk anamorphics, I feel like anamorphic has something there. I know my mom doesn't see it. She loves movies, but she doesn't see anamorphic. There's something there that I feel like attracted to. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but Don't Breathe one, the other one, we shot it with the Leica Sumiluxes. And what I wanted to have is I wanted to have a lens that was dependable, that was a workhorse, that I had a range of a lot of focal distances, because I know that the director of that one, Fede, loves the camera and he wants to have the more flexibility you can give him, the better. So I said, like, okay, let's have something that's dependable, that works always the same, that I can go from here to over there without having to, change a diopter. And but at the same time, I felt like the contrast between what's sharp and what's blurry was interesting. So we used them usually wide open, which was a little bit of a nightmare, but it ended up working well. So I think on the lens, on the camera, I will go Alexa all the time, but on the lens, I change. Sometimes I shot this movie in Canada that's called Look Away, about a very perfect family in northern New York. And we used master anamorphics, probably the most perfect lens that you can find. Perfection, it's a weird thing. It's not always good. And but then The Girl in the Spiders, where we used this Alexa 65 with these very nice lenses. But then, this one, Don't Breathe 2, which was more organic, more earthy, Antebellum, the same, more human, more close, more I think it's a tool, you know. And if you have
Right.
if you're lucky enough to have a choice, you have to experiment as much as you can. The best guy that does that is this guy, Dan Sasaki at Panavision. He's kind of a guru, and he's like, he listens to you, to what you want for the movie. He asks you questions that you can ask yourself. You know, what do I want? What do I have? How are the locations? Do I have tall ceilings or low ceilings? Do I have? I'm going to put overhead lights or not? Or it's going to be practical? And you start kind of sewing all those stuff together, and when you pull it together, you find the lens. If not, if you cannot choose, use whatever you have. Try to make it expressive. Try to say something, but use whatever you have. Whatever you have now, it's better to what we had when we were kids. An iPhone is 1,000 times better to what we had. You know, I used to make this. I was lucky I have this friend that had a camera. We used to do like stop motion with a high-8 video camera. It was crap, like rec stop, you know.
No, I think that that's such good advice, and I'm glad that that's kind of one of the ending points of this conversation. Is this gear is everything and nothing, right? It's everything and it's nothing. It's so important to help you tell the story, and yet you can still tell the story if you can think creatively and make those adjustments. And I think that there's some real value in starting from a place of, you know, maybe you're starting with a 5D and you don't have a huge budget for all this great stuff and you have to think your way around it. And then by the time you get these fantastic cameras and lenses in your hand, you've kind of gone through the boot camp of like, I know how to think my way through these problems. So now that I have this great stuff, I can use it to the fullest extent of its abilities.
Yeah, in a way, it's secondary for the purposes of the storytelling, right? But you need to know the limitations and the advantages of your gear. When you have that 5D, talking specifically about that, and you're shooting and you're handheld, you know, you see the whole like jelly effect, and it sucks. You know, what should I do? Well, put it on a stand. You know, if you don't have stand, you know, get a pile of books and put it there.
Right.
But do something, because that sucks. And that's that kind of, it's like, I don't know who said that the lack of limitations is the enemy of art, because it's like that. You know, when you can do whatever you want, you don't think about it. But when you have a wall or a 5D, and you kind of go through the wall, or you kind of have that fancy whatever color space the Alexa has, well, you have to work around it. Maybe you shoot black and white. Maybe you shoot everything with the same lens and create a new, I don't know, whatever. But you have to think about what's your story. Think about the bones of your story you're telling, and try to get to the core of it and say like, okay, how do I translate that into my thing with the camera or whatever I have. I know the 5D, yeah, it sucks. But at the same time, it's like this. You can put it wherever. You can put it under this table, and you don't need to lift when you try to cram a big camera in a place, you end up lifting the person on two Apple boxes, and then you have to make a path for that person to walk on two Apple boxes, which restrains the acting, and it's like it becomes a big circus. With a 5D, you don't need that. You just put the camera there.
Right.
And so it has its advantages and disadvantages, but I think if your focus is on the story, you'll be fine.
I love that. As a storyteller in several genres, that is absolutely, I agree with you. That is my favorite. I think stories change the world. I think they change the way we think and the way we understand each other and how we relate to each other and the world around us. So I 100% agree with you there. Before we get to the very last question, Bobby Thompson would like to know if there's a difference between the process of coming into shooting mid-series, like a mini-series, versus features, like episodic versus, a big feature film. How does that process differ?
Yeah, there's a difference. I didn't shoot too much television, but I did shoot this show that's called Penny Dreadful City of Angels.
Yes.
I shot 4 episodes, so I delved in, right. I was in there, and there was a fair good amount of prep for that show. It was kind of a big show, so I don't know if it's. I know. I also shot the pilot for Swamp Thing. Two shows that were canceled, but I hope it wasn't because of the cinematography. I don't think so. Um, um, the difference there are differences, mostly in time. On TV, you have Penny Dreadful had 14 days per episode, which was awesome. It was a lot. And the pilot for Swamp Thing had 14 days too, also. But all the other episodes for Swamp Thing were 10-day episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to shoot really fast. And so you have to build a system that's kind of foolproof, and that you know that you can go fast and delivering consistent good results, right? So it's also about setting up a system. On a movie, Don't Breathe 2, we shot 52 days. I mean, there were no idling days. We were running all the time. It was a bigger script also. We had a lot of things going on. And but the main difference is the time. Then I was surprised on the amount of money there was for these TV shows. I think there was more money for these TV shows than for this movie. And that's good, obviously, right? Because the crews were really good, and we had everything we wanted. But the storytelling itself always becomes a little bit lazy, because you have less time, and there's a lot of the stories driven by the dialogue, right? So there's a lot of, establisher, shot, and reverse. It's tough. When I see TV that breaks with that, my heart goes like, look at that. Geniuses. I mean, it's difficult to do, man. It's really difficult to do.
Yeah. That would be great if audiences could understand those limitations a little bit, because it's so easy to be like, it didn't do the thing, and I didn't like how it was. It's like, man, these guys are doing the best they can with
they're breaking their asses
like
off.
There's limitations there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's some. Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. I don't know, but I like. I mean, there's so much good television, but at the same time, we always say when I always try to have a set that has a good mood, right? That there's no screaming. We are like trying to have a good time. We spend a lot of hours together, and I really care about the well-being of everyone, right? And I forgot where I was going. But yeah, no, I don't know. I totally lost myself. I just wanted to say that. I guess I think that being good people on the set, it really matters.
Agreed. That I think that's one thing that I'm the proudest of, and the feedback I get from the teams that I work with is that it was great to be on set, and that makes me happy, because that means they're more likely to work with me again in the future. But that means that it was a good experience, in addition to hopefully producing a good product.
Exactly. The work it's hard enough to have a bad time there.
Agreed.
We are all working there.
So, Bobby, I hope that answered your question. We have already gone over our time. It's so hard to keep it condensed when it's such a great conversation. So first, sir, I will say thank you so much for being here with me today. And then finally, so my final question before we jump off of YouTube is, what is your why? Why creation as a job?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yes.
With this director, we did Don't Breathe. We are good friends, and we were talking a lot about that. Why is that? I don't really know exactly. I think that it's kind of a need, but at the same time, it's something that I feel comfortable with. about being flexible with stuff. I think flexibility is key to be creative because it allows you to connect different weird things that may not be related or may not seem related at first. And I think it's some kind of the drive. Why the drive? It's addictive also because when you are like shooting, and now that I just wrapped this movie, I know tomorrow and the days after I'm gonna be through the withdrawal period of having to create everything, something new every day. So I don't know why. I think it has some kind of pleasure to it to know that there was nothing and suddenly there's something. And I always tell that to the creators, to the real writers of the script and the ideas, and I go like, what do you think about this? There was nothing. There was an idea in your mind, and now look at this. We built this house that now is there. Now these characters are dressed as real people, and they're walking around and talking. What do you think about that? And they go like, oh yeah, you're right. It's freaking awesome. So I don't know. Maybe it's something about that, Maybe it's God complex. I don't know. I hope not.
I wonder that myself very often.
Like, what do you think I am? Then I go back to my house and I'm like that person again. I kind of be going like, yeah, let's paint it all red. Who do you think you are?
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's funny when you get home, you're just dad, right? Or friend or brother or whatever. And whenever I leave this space, I go be mom and just be a normal person.
Which is very important too.
It is, because if we did nothing but create all the time, I think our heads would be this big and we would just be cruising around being like, I'm the king of all that I survey. Thank you very much.
the famous bored God complex, right? Like, move little thing. I created you.
Yep. So it's a good thing we have these regular lives.
It's fun. And it's also, I think it's even more fun when you do it with people, with people, with other people, whatever, friends or not friends. That communication there's something really interesting. It's like playing music sometimes, It's like a different type of language that some people speak. And you can communicate, and it's like, oh, look, and what if we do this to that? Yeah, that looks amazing. Wow, well done. That's great. And what if we move the camera through it? Yeah, why not? That's great too. And that kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's almost like the pleasure you get when you are building Legos,
Yeah.
Like, you go piece by piece and then think and suddenly you're, oh, I love this. Okay, let's do it again.
Yeah, and then you have to show everybody, did you see what I made? There's a guy in there. It's amazing.
I have my kids for that. They go like, Dad is such a good Lego builder.
Yep. I just built an alien spaceship with my son yesterday. So
Nice.
Yep, I know how that goes. So, all right, everybody that was here today with us, Bobby, my mom was here today, Kelly, guys, thank you so much for being here. I hope that you will not only like this video, but share, because I felt like this conversation with Pedro had so many so much good wisdom, so many insights, not just into cinematography and approaching a film, but art in general and how you use your creativity and where you source your ideas and all of that stuff. So if you know people who could benefit from hearing this great conversation, please share that with them. The article will be out soon, so be looking for that. And tomorrow we will have Emily Teague here on the show. She's a fashion photographer based in New York, so be here for that conversation. And until tomorrow, for my